Hello there. Welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and we've got a situation.
Combative hearing today for Attorney General Pam Bondi.
You don't tell me
I did. Running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice.
Claims of a cover-up grow louder after Trump's Attorney General appears before angry members of Congress.
We're going to be talking to one of those members of Congress, Democrat Ted Lieu of California. But first,
following last month's release of 3 million heavily redacted files related to the late Jeffrey Epstein, members of the United States Congress have now been allowed to view digital versions in a small room at the Justice Department, eliciting reactions like this.
It's disgusting. There are lots of names, lots of co-conspirators, and they're trafficking girls all across the world.
Lots of names, but not all. The co-authors of the Epstein Transparency Act, Democrat Ro Khanna and Republican Thomas Massie, soon discovered that many names remain redacted.
Yesterday, Congressman Massie and I went to the Department of Justice to read the unredacted Epstein Files. We spent about 2 hours there, and we learned that 70 to 80% of the files are still redacted.
So the Justice Department then unredacted the identities of 6 men, which Ro Khanna proceeded to name.
Salvatore Navora, Zorab Mikoladze, Leopig Leonor, Nicola Caputa, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, CEO of Dubai Ports World, and billionaire businessman Leslie Wexner, who was labeled as a co-conspirator by the FBI.
Then the Guardian newspaper did some digging, and they soon found that while Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, an Emirati billionaire who has now resigned, and Les Wexner, the billionaire American retail magnate, are certainly well known, the other 4 names that Khanna mentioned appeared to have no apparent connection to Epstein whatsoever. Their pictures were just randomly put into a police photo lineup. Oops. The Department of Justice blames Khanna and Massie for naming the apparently innocent men. Khanna and Massie blame the Department of Justice.
it's a total mess. But let's face it, there is absolutely no way that the House can possibly examine hundreds of thousands of redactions from, 9 to 5 in a viewing room with only 4 monitors in, a few days? Impossible. Although House Rep Becca Balance does seem to have a general flavour of what's going on.
Just wanted to ask you, have you had a chance to review any of the unredacted files over at the DOJ, the Epstein Files?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I just came from there.
What can you tell us?
There's a bunch of sick fucks.
And I mean...
Seems Balance made a great start, but she might need a few more days, I suspect. There was one document in particular, though, that Democrats were very interested in.
It was during the period of the 2009 investigation, and Epstein's lawyers synopsized and quoted Trump as saying that that Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of his club at Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago, and he had never been asked to leave.
Now, to be fair, that doesn't implicate Trump in any of Epstein's crimes, but it does suggest that Trump has been less than honest with the public. Equally, there was another document that came out this week, which Democrats also said shows Trump's dishonesty, although this one seems to offer plenty for Trump supporters as well. It was describing an interview conducted in 2019 of former Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Reiter, who says that Trump called him way back in 2006 when the Epstein charges first became public. He says Trump told him that Epstein's activities with teenage girls were well known in both New York and Palm Beach. Quote, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this," Trump reportedly said. And also, he supposedly said that Ghislaine Maxwell was evil and the police should focus on her. Finally, Trump supposedly said that he had been around Epstein once when teenagers were present and he got the hell out of there. And confusingly, in this document, Trump apparently said back in 2006 that he had thrown Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club. So make of that what you will. Did Trump throw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago or not? Was he aware of Epstein's behaviour, or did he know nothing at all, like he's been saying recently? And does this potentially make Trump one of Epstein's early critics? According to the AP, it's not just Trump. No one's implicated in Epstein's crimes. US Attorney Maureen Comey wrote to FBI officials last year to say that no videos or photos showed Epstein victims being sexually abused. None showed any males with any of the nude females, and none contained evidence implicating anyone other than Epstein and Maxwell. She said if those videos existed, they would have pursued those leads, but they didn't find any such videos. She also said they found payments to more than 25 women who appeared to be models, but there was no evidence that Epstein was prostituting women to other men. Now, you might think Comey had no idea and she was wrong. I'd say it's increasingly looking like she was wrong, but that was what she thought, and she was the prosecutor. Regardless, the American people are not buying any of this. To Trump's great frustration, in a recent YouGov poll, 50% of respondents thought that Trump himself was involved in Epstein's crimes, and only 29% thought he was not. It looks like, John, that it really doesn't matter what does or doesn't come out of this process, that Trump is wearing it regardless.
That is certainly the case right now. Following that snafu of the naming of apparently innocent men, Congressman Ro Khanna, undaunted, then dangled this intriguing bit of correspondence from a political figure to Epstein from February 2016 with the subject line, "I beat Bush."
Hi, Jeffrey. I got more votes than Jeb Bush in Iowa, and I only had one congressional district. He had 4. It's so funny to me, totally embarrassing to him. Still, like Trump, and might be a delegate to the Republican convention.
The writer of this email then goes on to talk about scuba diving off Epstein's island before signing off with,
"Love ya."
All very chummy. That email was sent just 2 days after the 2016 Iowa Republican caucus won by Ted Cruz over Donald Trump, with the former favourite Jeb Bush finishing in 6th place with around 5,000 votes. There's been a lot of speculation in recent days that maybe that email to Epstein was actually sent by Marco Rubio, now Trump's Secretary of State. He is a Floridian, known to like scuba diving. If the correspondent was in the Iowa caucus, though, it could also have been Dr. Ben Carson or Senator Rand Paul. But that doesn't explain where the writer said, "I only had one congressional district." That suggests it could actually be anyone who once ran in an Iowa congressional district or primary from any party and won more than Bush's 5,238 caucus votes. And that is a much longer list, to be sure. So while that remains a mystery, Republican Representative Nancy Mace says she has now seen a list of Epstein clients and is accusing the Department of Justice of protecting them.
Talking about famous people, rich people, people in power, prime ministers, former presidents, etc., media personalities that are named in these files. And that's why I say this is going to go down as the greatest cover-up, one of the greatest cover-ups in American history.
And by the way, we're focusing on the child sexual abuse-related materials here, but this email dump has plenty of horrible little surprises for Trump that have nothing to do with children. Like this email, for instance, that Epstein sent to Michael Wolff back in 2017. It's a short email, but very unwelcome. Some at dinner with Donald last night were concerned about dementia. Tons of makeup did not recognise old friends. Now, one way to interpret that is that Trump is still having dinner with Epstein in 2017. Either way, Epstein's takeaway and his friend's takeaway seems to be that Trump had dementia 9 years ago. Trump would not be enjoying that email.
I don't think he's enjoying any of this right now. Meanwhile, the head of Trump's Justice Department, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, appeared before the House Judiciary Committee last week. Now, members typically get just 5 minutes to make a statement and ask the questions of the witness. So the pressure is really on, and Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin did not appreciate Pam Bondi's attempts to run the clock down.
And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything.
did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
No, you didn't. In fact, Raskin was a professor of constitutional law for more than 25 years. After graduating from Harvard Law School, he was also editor of the Harvard Law Review in that time. So he sounds pretty lawyery to me, but still, it seems Pam Bondi came to this congressional hearing spoiling for a fight with a so-called burn book of opposition research into various controversies to throw back at her congressional questioners.
Yeah, I understand why you don't want to talk about Mohammed Solomon in your district.
In any event,
who murdered people.
I'd like to see flip to the Jared Moskowitz section of the binder. I'm interested to see what staff provided on the oppo on me, and because we're in the Olympics, I'm going to give it a grade. I just want to see how good it is.
It was funny and testy in equal parts. Congressional reporter Ben Weiss, though, spotted something else in Bondi's burn book. She had records of which Epstein Files members of Congress had viewed in that little room at the Justice Department. Even Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, when asked about that, said it was inappropriate. And in one of Bondi's weirder moments, she said that members of Congress should basically forget about Epstein and focus on how great the stock market's going.
That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
This tactic of never even trying to answer the question, just reading out pre-written insults and clapbacks, it did not work for 1 second. No. But sometimes it really didn't work. Like when Bondi tried it on the rather outspoken Becca Ballant.
Meet with the survivors. They have been asking for a year. Meet with the survivors. Do the right thing. I yield back.
I was curious if you, Congresswoman, asked Bill Clinton that. Didn't see one tweet, not one. I didn't see one tweet when Joe Biden was in office about Bill Clinton. Didn't ask Merrick Garland anything about Epstein, not once when he was...
Weak sauce.
And also, I want the record to reflect that, you know, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning...
Oh, is Jewish. I just want to be clear. Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust? Really?
The committee will be in order.
Do not mess with Becca Ballant. But seriously, that was a really poor effort from Bondi. And it wasn't even her worst moment, that moment of the hearing. That worst moment came when Democrat Dan Goldman tried to draw Bondi's attention to the survivors in the room, and she didn't look at them for 1 second.
Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you, who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi, it looks like you have some more witnesses.
Gentlemen, this time has expired.
She did not look once.
What a moment.
Things have sure changed since this old ad was recorded.
Florida ranks 3rd nationally in calls for help for human trafficking, where young women and children are enslaved and abused. I knew we needed all hands on deck, and I'll fight to put human trafficking monsters where they belong, behind bars.
Pam Bondi, our Attorney General.
She really emphasized some words. By the way, a lot of people are asking why Bondi never did anything about Epstein when she was Attorney General in Florida between 2011 and 2019. And Epstein, he lived in Florida. Well, law professors have been asked about this, and one said that given there'd just been an investigation into Epstein by both federal and state prosecutors when she became Attorney General, and that investigation had just concluded with Epstein's imprisonment, there was no reason to start a new investigation unless someone brought something new to Bondi, which no one did. So that's one thing that maybe people shouldn't be blaming Bondi for, just that one thing.
Maybe. But if Pam Bondi didn't have much light to shed on this whole affair last week, also appearing before a congressional committee was Epstein's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was refusing to even answer the most basic of questions.
Were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution.
She did that repeatedly. Maxwell, of course, currently serving a 20-year sentence for her crimes at a Texas prison farm. Her attorney, though, said that she is prepared to speak fully and honestly if President Trump grants her clemency.
The key bit of that statement, though, came straight after that quote, John, which was, only she can provide the complete account. For example, both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Miss Maxwell can explain why, so that is fairly unsubtle, John. Pardon me, and I'll clear your name. I guess we'll see if Trump takes the bait.
Yes, it's a fairly inartful deal. Among the members of Congress looking for answers from Pam Bondi last week was the Democrat from California, Ted Lieu, who wanted to know why there are literally thousands of victims who have been named out there. The Justice Department has not prosecuted anybody apart from Maxwell and Epstein.
Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we sit here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
Turns out she didn't resign, but Ted Lieu does join us now from Los Angeles County in California. Congressman, welcome to Planet America.
Thank you.
One of your congressional colleagues, Republican Nancy Mace, one of the very few Republicans to call for the release of the Epstein files, now says she has seen these unredacted files, the semi-redacted files, and has concluded President Trump's in the clear. She says, take the politics out of this now. Let's focus on the abusers, not the president. What do you say to that?
That is incorrect. There are numerous documents where there are allegations that Donald Trump committed crimes, including serious crimes. And when you look at all the files, it doesn't show that the Department of Justice did very much follow-up or any follow-up at all. So the Department of Justice needs to release all the files, whether or not they have Donald Trump in them or not, and simply redact the victims, but they need to release all the files.
Congressman, watching the hearing the other day, it was said that underneath the redactions, when you guys are looking at the unredacted files, there are other redactions that you can't see behind. Is that meant to be happening? Is that legal?
That is not legal. And so we've asked for a number of documents. I've specifically asked for a number of documents for them to unredact the documents, because when I saw it at the Department of Justice, by the way, they creepily spied on what I was looking at. You may have seen that. But anyways, when I saw some of these documents, the original was also redacted. That is not acceptable. So we've asked for their unredacted version of the original so that we can see it.
Congressman, we're now in the situation where not only were half of the 6 million files withheld altogether, the 3 million were heavily redacted, still redacted. We're hearing now reports, another Republican colleague of yours, Thomas Massie, saying that some of those files that were published a couple of weeks ago are now being pulled offline by the Justice Department, accusing Attorney General Bondi of engaging in a cover-up. Is that where we're at?
Absolutely. It is a cover-up. Let me just give you one stunning statistic. The Department of Justice has acknowledged there were over 1,000 victims of Epstein's sex trafficking operation. The Department of Justice, under Donald Trump, has prosecuted exactly 0 men. So that's just a ludicrous number. The only way you get to that kind of bizarre situation is if there's a cover-up at the Department of Justice. And I don't know why the Department of Justice doesn't understand that when you post something on the internet, it doesn't ever go away. So we're going to see those files anyways.
Congressman, you mentioned the spying allegations. Well, the proof. We saw photos of it. Do you think that any laws were potentially broken by the DOJ spying on congressional searches in the document viewing room, or is it just generally an abuse of power rather than breaking the law?
It's definitely an abuse of power. And by the way, an abuse of power is grounds for impeachment. We're also going to look to see if there's actual federal laws that were violated. And it wasn't just that they were spying on us. They were spying on us to then let the Attorney General know what we were looking at to prepare her for her testimony to be used against us. So it was very nefarious. And by the way, it didn't work because Attorney General Pam Bondi performed totally horribly during that hearing.
Defenders of the Attorney General, though, Congressman, would argue it is quite appropriate that the Attorney General of the United States be as prepared as she can be, knowing what you are likely to be asking about out of 3 million potential documents that could be the centre of your question. That just means that Congress is getting some reasonably useful answers, doesn't it?
That is not the way that under the Constitution it works with the separation of powers, the executive branch and the legislative branch. You don't do these things to each other. And if they're going to do that, then they just have to disclose it and say, hey, we're going to be creepily spying on what you're doing at our computers here in the Department of Justice. They never disclose that.
Congressman, how is it, do you think, that the DOJ's redactions were of such poor quality? I mean, even from a purely cynical point of view, you'd expect them to want to get redactions right for legal reasons and also for PR reasons.
So generally, when something horrible happens in government, and it can be explained by incompetence or maliciousness, I generally go with incompetence. But under the Trump Department of Justice, I'm going with maliciousness, because what you see is not just incompetence. You see essentially documents where literally they have a whole bunch of victims' names and they'll redact one of them. But then they disclose all the other victims' names. That is totally horrible because it just ruined the lives of a lot of these victims that until now had never been disclosed. So when you look at a document like that, it looks completely malicious to me.
Congressman, can you explain the limitations placed on you and others who have seen the less redacted versions of these documents than we, the general public, are able to see, and why it is that you can't tell us things that are currently redacted, or indeed can you, or is there a risk of litigation?
So it's not just that there are these limitations, it's that we don't have access to all the documents, right? There's 3 million withheld. And so there's sometimes no context for what you're seeing. So you could be looking at a document that looks really incriminating, but without sort of other documents to support it or not support it, you don't feel as comfortable sort of saying something because it is not clear without all the context. Now, of the documents that have been released, sometimes you don't need any context. So, for example, during the hearing, I showed 2 pictures of former Prince Andrew over a victim whose face was redacted. And under the commercial law, you can only redact if the person is a victim of the sex trafficking, and Attorney General Bondi acknowledged she was a victim. So that photo by itself shows that Prince Andrew is over a victim of sex trafficking. And under the laws, if you patronize Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation, you are also guilty. And for the life of me, I don't understand why the Department of Justice is not prosecuting former Prince Andrew.
Congressman, one of the Attorney General's consistent defences against claims of a cover-up is to say, well, this was all out there and available to the previous Attorney General and the previous President, Democrats. If we're covering up now, they were covering up then. What do you say to that?
Well, she's lying again because they had an active, open investigation under the Department of Justice during the Biden administration, and they were continuing to investigate, and it was Attorney General Pam Bondi who shut that investigation down last July. There was a July 2025 memo from her Department of Justice that shut down the investigation. So that's actually what happened. And you don't talk about an ongoing active investigation. And that's why the Biden administration, Department of Justice, wasn't saying anything because they were still investigating until Pam Bondi shut it down last year.
In 3 years' time, at the end of this administration, where are you hoping we will be in the Epstein investigation, and where are you expecting we will be?
All the Epstein Files documents have been released with the victims redacted, and that we have people being held accountable. The whole point of this is to hold accountable the people that raped, sexually assaulted, and abused girls.
Congressman, I guess that was the point of the Epstein Transparency Act when it passed late last year. It hasn't had that effect. Is there further legislative or legal recourse? Is this about the balance of power in the House after November? What makes that difference now?
Democrats, I am confident, will flip the House in November, and that means we get subpoena power. And so we're going to start issuing subpoenas for specific documents, for specific witnesses, for specific people in administration. So that will be a big difference. And I do note there has been some accountability. You do have a number of these men and some women who have resigned because of the disclosures in the Epstein files. But to date, the Trump Department of Justice has held no man accountable, even though there's been over 1,000 victims of Epstein's pedophilia sex trafficking ring.
Congressman Ted Lieu, thanks for being with us on Planet America.
Thank you.
The Trump administration's so-called border czar, Tom Homan, has announced the end of the immigration operation in the state of Minnesota that has left 2 people dead and thousands arrested, including hundreds of American citizens who are protesting against the crackdown. Homan says the wider mission, though, will continue.
For those that say we are backing down from immigration enforcement or the promise of mass deportations, you are simply wrong. Look at the data. Record number of arrests and deportations under President Trump's first year. And we'll continue that effort.
Tom Homan was brought in last month to try and dial down tensions following those shooting deaths of 2 Americans, Renee Good and Alex Pretty, at the hands of immigration agents who are looking for people illegally in America. Democratic Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, says the operation has had a profound impact in his state.
Over the past 6 weeks, the state of Minnesota and the people of this great state have endured an unprecedented federal invasion in all aspects of life. Our sense of normalcy was shook to the core. The trauma that's been inflicted, certainly across an immigrant community, but to every single Minnesotan, is unlike anything we've witnessed.
Yeah, we're definitely moving into a new phase of this mass deportation campaign, John. The controversial National Guard deployments from last year we talked about so much, they've also been quietly wound back. As of last month, there were still 500 National Guard members in Chicago, 200 in Portland and 100 in Los Angeles, but they've all now gone home. That was after the Supreme Court told them to go home back in December. On this occasion, the Trump administration did actually listen to the Supreme Court, which was welcome. Although the National Guard is still present where it's allowed to be. There are still 2,500 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. There are also National Guard present in Memphis and New Orleans, where the state governors actually want them.
Yes, but as for Minnesota, where the governors certainly did not want them, President Trump thinks there's been too much attention on these deaths. What about everyone who hasn't been shot?
2 people. It's bad. I hate it. I hate even talking about it. 2 people out of tens of thousands, okay? And you get bad publicity.
So unfair. Polls show that 6 in 10 Americans now disapprove of the job that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is doing. And voters are not giving Trump credit for all the people that haven't been shot either. Even the very Trump-friendly Rasmussen poll, which had his approval at 54% just 1 year ago, has now slipped this month to 41%. 3 other major pollsters this month also putting Trump's approval in the 30s as well.
Tonight on Fox, the problem with everyone gets a trophy culture.
I really can't stand everyone gets a trophy culture.
Mr. President, this is your Peace Prize.
Our society doesn't have standards anymore. Everybody gets a trophy.
The trophy says the undisputed champion of beautiful, clean culture.
Everybody gets a trophy.
It's engraved for President Trump.
Everyone gets a trophy.
Venezuela's opposition leader presented President Trump with her Nobel Peace Prize.
From the Everyone Gets a Trophy department.
Our Patriot of the Year recipient, Donald J. Trump.
Congratulations, Donald Trump, winner of the Everyone Gets a Trophy.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you back here at 9:35 p.m. next Monday night on ABC TV. Anytime you like on ABC, iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And for those of you wondering what's happened to the Friday night show on ABC News, it's taking a little break until closer to the midterms. So for now, Monday night's the night. But don't worry, there is still the Planet Extra podcast Pep for an even deeper dive. You wait to see how much Epstein content we got in tomorrow's pod. See you there.
Bye-bye.